Vince Staples has one of the most interesting careers in all of hip-hop. From being an honorary member in Odd Future to starring in his very own Netflix show, the Vince Staples story is a story that shows the positive in being true to oneself. And more than anything, it shows the positive of gaining fame the right way, which might make you ask, what's the right way? But to understand that, we need to understand how we got here in the first place. Though he was born in Compton, Vince Staples would grow up in Long Beach, California. And though Long Beach might have been safer than Compton, the environment and culture of the place was still a dangerous one that led Vince down a life of crime.
And that was part of gang life is just, something that's a part of our community where we come from. If you think about history of black people and, Hispanic people in Los Angeles County, or Southern California in general, that's one of the only things we have culturally and disputes from things that had a positive message. Whether you're talking about Ralph Coenga, Bunchy Carter, all these people that we know as political activists, which people don't know kind of sparked that whole identity of gang life. It's just part of our culture, and if you have nothing better to do, you often find time to do the wrong things. And that's just kind of where that fell into play.
Though usually this type of environment isn't something out of the ordinary when talking about rappers in early life, the culture of Long Beach was one that made Vince Staples feel disconnected from rap. Where much of the genre focused on the luxuries of making it out of the struggle, Vince felt disinterested in the chains and the mansions. Mainly, he just simply wished for the people around him to stop dying. Furthermore, the lack of connection made Vince someone who was never really interested in becoming a rapper. Instead, Staples would grow up wanting to be part of the gang life. In his words, that's everything he knew, everything his family was. By the time Vince was 13, much of the gang life had caught up with him. And though he tried staying out of trouble, he'd have to move out of California and head to Atlanta. Though he'd eventually return to his home state, the street life he had lived had left him numb. And with his hopes for graduating high school basically left in the dust, Vince seemed to be more committed to the street life than ever before. However, in his return home, Vince would hang out with two friends named DJ and Chuck, and his life would essentially change forever after a trip to LA.
It was him, his name was DJ, and it was this dude named Chuck, and Chuck lived in the hood by the park, and I lived on our teacher, so I would just go to their house when I don't want to hang out with my homies, get in trouble. And then one day he was like, hey, you want to go with me to LA? And I was like, all right. And we went to Sid House from the internet and Odd Future.
For those that don't know, Odd Future was essentially the first hip-hop collective to really utilize the internet and become probably the most significant hip-hop group of the last decade and a half or so. I mean, with the big three of Frank Ocean, Tyler the Creator, and Earl Sweatshirt, there's basically nobody who compares. And going back to 2010, 2011, being associated with Odd Future was a big deal. It was kind of like being part of the cool kids. And that's what Vince Staples essentially walked into, or at least on paper. Though Odd Future would become a hip-hop dynasty, Vince was not really a part of any of it. And at least according to Vince himself, he didn't really have any meaningful relationships with anybody in Odd Future outside of Earl. Hence why Vince was never really an official member of Odd Future. In fact, I found a story about how Vince was looked at as somewhat of an outsider amongst Odd Future according to Sid. At the time, certain people acted like, if you ain't from Odd Future, then you can't sit with us towards him. It's a testament to his genius that he could move past that and be like, this is my music over here. It doesn't sound like them. I can do it by myself. But that isn't to say that the Odd Future hype didn't also help Vince Staples though. A feature on Earl Sweatshirt's first mixtape would get him caught up in the Odd Future frenzy, and the association goes a long way sometimes. And to not be left in the dust, Vince would have to improve much more as an artist. Throughout the years that followed, Vince would put in hard work to perfect his craft. Instead of putting on a chain and trend chasing, he would actually put in some work and actually improve as a rapper, sacrificing short-term gain for long-term success. But of course, this was easier said than done. His lack of connection from hip-hop had left Vince Staples behind, and a priority in getting better was actually learning from the greats that came before him.
When I started rapping, you can't do a job without training, and my manager had been around for a long time, so he done had me listen to some things. He had me listen to Bloom Mind State for the first time. He told me how to listen to Illmatic.
So he gave you assignments?
Nah, he was like, you ain't never heard this? And I said, nah. He thought I was lying. And then somebody was like, nah, he really don't be on that.
Almost as important, Vince met Mac Miller. And though that may not seem like a big deal, Mac became the most, or one of the most influential people in Vince's career.
Like, he would sit there and like teach me how to make sure I'm on beat and like rap with certain energy. And like it took a long time. It wasn't like it took, I was over there every day. with nothing else to do for like months, and he was teaching me how to rap on beat, how to project. I didn't know how to ad lib. I didn't know what ad libs was. I didn't know what a metronome was. He taught me what all that shit was. He taught me how to what quantizing means, how to push it on the grid, and even down to like this is what certain keys are and shit like that. And then introducing me to people I had no business meeting because I wasn't at the skill level yet.
By the time Vince was 22, he was ready to release his debut studio record, Summertime '06.
Bitch, you thirsty, please grab Sprite. My crib's lurking, don't die tonight.
And though the record didn't make much impact in terms of sales, the record did make an impact on hip-hop circles,
Still banging, too naughty, too nasty. Still fuck the police, they won't catch me.
making Vince one of the brightest young rappers in the hip-hop scene and one that many fans looked forward to whenever he dropped. In just about 5 years, Vince went from a person with no future in mind to a promising rapper with a dedicated fan base through hard work and a little bit of luck. And that was really only the beginning of Vince Staples' rise. But before we go forward, it's important to understand that the rise of Vince Staples is not the same rise you're probably thinking about. Vince Staples has never charted a song in Billboard's Hot 100. He's never even been nominated for a Grammy, not even for a VMA. So how is it that Vince Staples of all rappers ends up with a Netflix show? And to answer that question, we have to fast forward to 2017's Big Fish Theory.
I was up late night ballin', counting up hundreds by the thousand.
On the surface, there's not much of a difference between this record and Staples' previous releases, at least commercially. However, the record proved to be much more profitable than most hip-hop records because of the idea for marketing Big Fish Theory. Where most rappers would make a record for the radio, Vince made an album for the movies.
I made the album so it could get synced for movies. Call of Duty gave me to do one song that they didn't even use was more than my whole album budget. And this is all the meantime I'm making this album, and I'm touring. I'm like, all right, so if I can get 10 songs, every one of these songs can get synced.
Right.
Then I don't need nothing else. You feel me?
That's genius.
That's when Bad and Bougie was out. So it's like, all right, you got to think about how many they was doing all kind of alien movies, all kind of superhero movies. Marvel was popping, so they can't play these songs essentially when they playing in these movies.
This idea has proven to be successful for Vince, as he can be found on the soundtracks for films like Creed, Into the Spider-Verse, Queen and Slim, Pitch Perfect 3, Black Panther, and I guess you get the point. Vince Staples found the cheat code to where he would have the same level of richness that other rappers have while taking a much safer approach. Additionally, he wouldn't have to deal with the same levels of fame either. This also more or less protects Vince Staples from actually trend chasing, and it places him in a market with much less competition. But that's not all, because Vince made himself flexible by taking up acting.
Hello, random teenager. Want a Sprite?
You're Vince Staples.
You win.
2017 really proved to be the year where Vince Staples' popularity went to a whole nother level, and additionally, it also built the foundation for the Vince Staples we now know. In the following years, music-wise, Vince would drop critically acclaimed projects in 2018's FM,
One shine circle in the block. Little buddy got murdered on the fly.
his 2021 self-titled release,
Ever known, ask me for a loan, leave me alone.
and 2022's Ramona Broke My Heart.
Feeling like I'm floating to the ceiling, is it magic?
Which, not gonna lie, I kinda completely forgot about, but this is a gem, and you guys should really listen to it. On the other side of the coin, acting has proven to be another stream of income for Vince Staples to rely on. His performance on Abbott Elementary specifically showcased his talent to a lot of people that would have never known of Staples, which leads us to 2024. After a decade and a half of making himself someone in the scene, Vince Staples now has his very own show, a Netflix show at that. And I mean, if you rewound the video back to the very beginning, you'd see a kid with little to no prospects in life, the victim of a system that failed him. And yet, that wasn't the story that ended up unfolding. Instead, what we've seen is a journey of hard work, thinking outside of the box, and a little luck sprinkled in there because that's life. In other words, Vince Staples showed you how to gain fame the right way. Anyways, as I recorded this video, I've been watching the Vince Staples show and it seems pretty cool. With that being said, shout out to God, shout out to Jay Dilla, and yeah,